I absolutely love growing tomatoes, probably one of my favourite things to grow. So I thought I'd talk about how to grow great tomatoes without blight. So the first consideration is what kind of tomatoes do you want to grow? What kind of seeds are you going to get? And it kind of depends partly on your climate, but it also depends on the sort of person you are and how much time you actually want to spend in the garden. There are two types of tomato, determinate and indeterminate. Determinate variety tomatoes grow to a predetermined size, so they're like a kind of bush. And if you don't really want to get out in the garden regularly and you're not always going to be going around and pulling off suckers and all that sort of stuff, I would definitely say just get determinate tomatoes. They're just a lot easier, so they're going to grow to a bush. You don't really have to do any work, and all of the tomatoes come at roughly the same time. These are indeterminate, which means they're just going to keep growing and growing and growing along a vine until you decide to cut the ends off them. The advantage of these is that you get tomatoes that keep growing throughout the entire season. So the ones at the bottom along here will ripen up, you'll eat those, and the next ones, and then just keep going and going until you run out of warm weather and then you kill the plant. Whereas with your bush variety tomatoes, they just, once the plant has come to size and produces fruit, that's it, it's game over. The next consideration is, are you going to go for a small cherry tomato or something a bit larger? If you live in a climate that's not ideal for tomatoes, I would definitely recommend going for a cherry tomato just because they ripen up way faster. So if you've got a cooler summer or maybe you're likely to get blight, you're just making your chances of getting decent tomatoes much better by having cherry tomatoes that will grow in a really short space of time. A mate of mine grows these tomatoes. He uses a variety called hundreds and thousands, and they grow like like a bush tomato variety. So he does pretty much no work on it. You'll just put these things inside a hanging basket. They'll fall out of the hanging basket, grow down, and it's a really easy, low maintenance way to get a load of tomatoes. I grow them like this because I actually quite like coming out here and sort of picking away at the suckers and making sure they're growing well, and it's something that I kind of will come around here, drink a coffee in the morning, have a look around, pull out a few suckers, and so I enjoy it. But if you don't have time for that, these things, if you don't sort of look after them, they'll just grow out like and they'll create a bit of a mess really. So you want to kind of go around every other day or something and just remove a few suckers. So this is the sucker that you want to remove. So the suckers always grow just down, there's the fruit set here, they always grow just down from that right there. And if you don't remove that, that is going to become another stem like this one, another vine, and it's just going to come out over here. It makes them quite unmanageable, they're difficult to control. You also end up with like a lot of leaf matter everywhere. The other reason to remove these is there's only so much energy that this plant can give for its fruit based on its root system. So you might think, oh, if I just allow it to kind of come off, I'll get more tomatoes, but you won't. You'll get the same amount. It's just that if anything, you'll get more leafy green stuff everywhere, and yeah, it's just difficult to manage. If you live in a climate that's either damp or humid, then you're probably going to struggle a little bit with blight. So blight is like a fungal infection, and it will spread around tomatoes, but there are ways to kind of counteract it. So along here you can see that with all of these plants I've removed pretty much all of the lower leaves. The reason for that is that it just allows airflow to come in, and that lowers the chances of getting blight. And these lower leaves, it's not like you're going to damage the plant because they're not that great anyway. The ones at the bottom of the plant, they tend to sort of yellow. If I even see a small amount of kind of blight on them, I just take them off because blight can actually spread. So these upper leaves are doing most of the work here in terms of photosynthesizing, giving the energy, so I don't want them to get any blight, and it's these areas that seem to get the most blight. Partly that's probably just because the spores of the fungus are probably in this soil, and then also this is the bit when it rains it's going to get wet and splash up onto the plants. And so even along these sort of vines here, you can see that it's been damp. It rained an enormous amount last night, so we do have little kind of what is, I guess, the beginnings of blight on most of the vines, but it's not actually affecting the plants. The tomatoes still look good. It hasn't spreaded higher up, and the leaves up at the top are looking really green and healthy, so it's not a problem. We've got plenty of airflow coming through here, and as these continue to grow up, I'll keep sort of removing the leaves as I go. There's not loads of these sort of decaying bits of leaves to show you because I've been going around and kind of removing them on a pretty regular basis. But this leaf here, you've got quite a lot of yellowing around here. It's not looking very healthy. I'm pretty sure that that's caused by blight, so I would just happily remove it because I don't want it spreading to the rest of the plant. And like I say, it's not going to be doing a huge amount in terms of photosynthesis anyway. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm being pretty careful with my watering. So, you know, when the rain comes, that's just how it is. There's nothing you can do about that. But when it comes to watering the plants with a watering can, I'm being really careful with it. So if you live somewhere where it's hot and humid, I think it's worth, or that it's damp, I think it's worth watering in the mornings, not the evenings. The problem with watering in the evenings is you've got all of that time where the sun isn't going to dry anything out. So anything that's splashed up over the plants, you've got more of a chance of it getting blight. Whereas when you go early morning, you've still got a few hours before evaporation starts to sort of take its toll. But if there is anything on the leaves, it will quickly dry out and you'll have less chance of developing into any kind of mold or fungus. And I'm really careful when I water, so I would never just sort of like tip water all over the leaves. That's just gonna just give you more chances of getting blight. So it's much better just to have, I do it without the kind of rose thing on it, and I just pour it directly right onto the bottom and try and avoid it all just splashing up onto the plants. And I have noticed a difference, you know, like even if you go around with a hose and it's got a bit of power on it, it's quite easy for it all just to splash back up on all of these plants along here, all of the leaves, and then you're going to end up, you're going to end up with blight. We had a pretty big storm that came through last night, and these are all looking great. This is something new. I built this just a few months back. I'll link at the end of the program in case you want to see it. But these are like 8-foot long posts, 240, driven quite far into the ground, probably this far in, so there's very little chance of them going anywhere. And then there's the Florida weave method in between to hold them all up. And it's doing a really good job. But you don't have to go as kind of hardcore or industrial as this. Last year, I just used some wooden stakes into the ground and then just tied them together into a little teepee system, and that worked really well. And I'll show you over here, actually. I've got a few plants that I just left in the ground, so for a kind of really easy, lazy method, that works fine. These are just some extra plants I had, and rather than throw them out, I thought, oh, I'll just put them in the ground and see what happens. And, you know, they're growing fine. There's probably, you know, there's decent sized tomatoes in here growing. Like I say, we had a storm last night and none of them have broken. I mean, the only slight, it depends how neat you want to be with your garden. The slight thing is they're just growing all over the place. I haven't taken off any of the suckers, so they're just growing wherever they want to. They are spilling out into the pathway a bit, so, you know, if you wanted to get a wheelbarrow through here, you'd struggle, but so what? You know, it's growing fruit. They're fine. There you go. You can see a bit of blight. That's a bit of blight coming in there. So I suppose that's the disadvantage, maybe, that, you know, they're slightly harder to manage. So if that blight were to sort of spread amongst the rest of it, it might be harder to control than if they were growing neatly up a vine. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with this method. It works. The variety behind me I've been growing for years. They're called sungold, so they're an F1, so they're a hybrid variety. So you have to buy the seeds each year and you can't save them, which is a slight disadvantage. But I've always found that they've grown quite well. But you know, this year I also this was a plant that some local grower gave me, and I thought, you know, I need to get more kind of less boring in my tomato choices and start to grow a few different things. And the way to do that, I think, is to ask around in your local area and see what people are growing, because tomatoes, there are so many different types of tomatoes. Some of them grow really well in cooler climates. Some of them do better with the humidities that, you know, so rather than me say grow sungold, say, I would, ask people in your local area, see what they're growing. You can see here the effects of all that rain we had last night. There's these two tomatoes have just split open. It's just the way it is. We haven't had rain here for, I don't know, at least a month, maybe more, and then all of a sudden we got this enormous amount of rain, and so just bust the tomatoes open. There's not a whole lot you can do about that, I don't think, unless of course you're growing in a greenhouse, but we had a massive amount of rain, and as far as I can see, that's the only two tomatoes we've managed to break out of the whole lot, so it's not too bad. I'd be really interested to know what kind of tomatoes you're growing, so put them down in the comments. particularly if you've got something that will survive in a humid climate. Also, if you're interested in building this kind of weird monstrosity, but it does work, I'll put a link on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.